Well, interesting, the box idea. David Talbot is on next, and he's going to take us not all the way to Switzerland, just around the corner here to Betty's Bay, and tell us about something very fun and beautiful that he's doing out in Betty's Bay. Thank you very much, David. Sorry. And as I said before, the CPD points is ready. You can go and do that. Please, there's still some more speakers coming, and don't all run away. Thank you very much.
Cool, thanks. Thanks. Hi, everyone. Thanks to the Wood Conference, and thanks to all the sponsors. And it's a real privilege to be here today to tell you about this little project of ours in Betty's Bay. So my name's David Talbot, and I'm the principal of Platform. I've been in architecture for about 25 years now, starting out in CPUT and graduating in 1997, and I started Platform in 2018. And it was in that same year that Kerry Lancellis and Roger Landman commissioned me for the architectural design of their house in Kloof Road in Betty's Bay. They were really very ambitious about a project to design and construct a house in Betty's Bay, and they'd secured the site right on the border of the botanical gardens, the Harold Porter Botanical Gardens in Betty's Bay, which is really a spectacular site. Their sort of architectural ambitions for the house and their budget weren't really tying up, and we had lots of discussions around that, and I really recommended appointing a QS. They didn't want a QS. But they were really ambitious about it, and I mean, the site was magnificent. So off the R44 main road that runs through Betty's Bay, there's the botanical gardens and an access road to the site called Kloof Road, and that terminates in a cul-de-sac, and that's where the site is, bordered on the north and the east by the botanical gardens. So, despite kind of these concerns, they were really nice people, and I was just starting out, so I thought, well, let's do it. So we structured a fee in quite a creative way as well. That's probably a topic for another discussion, but something that could work time-wise, budgetary-wise, cash flow-wise, and then off we went. So, their ambition kind of went something like this, that they wanted to have a tree house in the forest. It had to have a bridge. It had to somehow be fitted between the treetops, and it also had to be connected to the natural environment. So I've been accused at times of not always listening, but never by my clients, actually. See, one or two laughs there. So those images are obviously of the final product, but getting there, as you can imagine, was a bit of a journey. And that's what I'll try to take you on now, is just a little bit of the journey in the short time that we've got in terms of describing to you this architectural project. So I thought this was really an opportunity to really immerse myself in the site, and really analyze the site, be part of it, and do all those cool things that you kind of, when you're a student, you think you're going to be doing more of as an architectural student. So I took a detailed brief from them, formulated a brief, and spent some time on site, climbing up the mountain above the site, being part of the environment, doing some sketching, and just observing the environment. It was April 2018 when we had our first meeting, structured an appointment, and eventually kind of signed on that in May, and then we started the inception. I started the inception process. The initial concept we'd kind of fleshed out in July, but that iterated itself over and over, and end of 2018 got to a final concept, and some design development, January, February 2019, March 2019, the first council submission. So the client put me up in the house next door. This is on the house on the south side of the property. Very cool little cottage. And me and my wife stayed there overnight, and I spent time on the site documenting it. And yeah, this house had a particular kind of quality to it as well, which I think influenced me to a degree. It's got a lot of interesting texture, form, and a particular quality to it. On the site itself, I kind of walked the site and mapped it. And each part of the site I've had like a different identity. So I came up with the term terrestrial identities. It's like made a name for this kind of thing, which somebody's probably come up with before, but it was just part of the creative process. So the aspects, different parts of the site. There was an embankment down from the road, 2 very significant trees amongst a range of other trees, a lot of bokkenhout trees. There was a dry riverbed. So those 2 converging valleys that you saw in the early imagery, there was a dry riverbed from one of those valleys running through the site. It was dry. We confirmed it was dry. We checked all the ground conditions. There were no adverse issues. But that had its own kind of quality to it. On the other side, there was a little clearing in the forest, and that had a particular feeling to it. And then there was a thicket on the edge. So all these kind of things these spaces had different qualities to them and different feelings. And I really wanted that to kind of, the building, the design, to respond to that. Around the edge of the site, it's quite different from actually what you see when you look at it from the street. That's like the Betty's Bay Park Run, which goes around the perimeter. So it's pretty stark. So the ground floor plane on that edge wasn't that exciting. Right in the treetops, you could see you could just get a glimpse through to the sea, which was pretty cool. And the forest floor, I mean, it's pretty magical. So these were just some really, initially then, responses to the site, which was really rudimentary, raw, elongated building form running in an east-west orientation with, facing north and also facing south circulation, edge along the south, some parking or garaging kind of closer to the street, and just early response, some early sketches, tectonics, like how does this thing, the form, it needed to be fragmented enough to be part of the landscape and the site and the forested trees, sympathetic to the neighbors, the context, natural beauty of the site, and climatic environmental conditions. Well, it's like a lot. That's a lot of expectation, but it's just part of the process, and that's what I'm trying to convey. So initially, the clients had, like I said, aspirations in terms of the idea of how they wanted to respond to the environment, but from a planning point of view, there was still a little bit of uncertainty. So these were initial diagrams looking at the accommodation, just basic diagrams, mapping out accommodation. This was starting out living areas downstairs and bedrooms upstairs, and then moving on to living areas upstairs, bedrooms downstairs. Then they decided, no, let's rather keep. They wanted all accommodation on one level after those kind of 2 meetings, because they had an uncle that had some accessibility challenges. They wanted to come visit, so they wanted everything on one level. So it's, sorry, going the wrong way. It's a journey. And then this was also just a rough sketch of a thought, of a response. It wasn't based on any planning. It was just a sketch. So, and the clients hadn't even seen it. So eventually, after a bit of a process, we landed on this layout, which was all accommodation on one level. And now you can start to see you're really bedded in the landscape on the Kloof Road side, a more rectilinear kind of shape, which housed garage, dining areas, kitchen areas. And then from that, a small bridge onto a lounge, living area, library, and then this rectilinear form on the southern edge. And that was really in response to the treetops, but also a response to the planned function of that, of what was a passage, essentially. On the lounge side, it was the edge to the space and the library, and then further down it became the edge to a circulation route, accessing the bedrooms and then finishing with an entrance into the master bedroom. So, and then on the northern edge, at the top, a much more rectilinear kind of edge facing mountain views and north aspects. That started to take form. On the left, you can see that's the masonry component. This was made out, at this stage, was envisaged to be brick and mortar, bedded in the landscape, and then this curvilinear southern edge meandering off that, floating above the landscape, with a more rectilinear kind of northern edge. That's how the form started to, and that was quite exciting, that there was some workshop spaces down below, but this is essentially the forest floor, ground floor plane, the building really floating above the landscape. And elevational wise, you can see at this stage, the junction between the lounge and bedrooms, that level change isn't quite resolved. That's probably why I got those two big cut lines there in that middle elevation. But that was still kind of taking shape. So this is modeled up then in Revit. It was quite really exciting. The slatted timber edge all had glass behind it. So that's facing south, so we could really open that up. And the slats were actually envisaged as baboon proofing. So, because there's quite an issue with baboons in that area, so the idea was to have a large sliding stacking screen that could open up. You could be really connected to the landscape at the same time. It could provide protection and connection. So we set this out on site. We got it surveyed, we pegged it, we looked at the heights, and then we actually figured that, you can see the elevational diagram below, we could actually keep that, not have a step between the two levels, keep it all one level, and on site it looked okay. It wasn't too high. I was trying to step it down to respond to the landscape, but having it on all one level was quite dramatic, and we were within the height restrictions, and it was fine. The scale of it felt fine on site, but it was quite nice to be able to do that on site. So that's how that connection between the two levels resolved itself initially. Finally, I think was quite cool. So the client was very happy with that. Again, we didn't have a cost, but they wanted to proceed, so we moved on to more design development drawings. You can see some imagery of the timber slatted screening there. Originally it was bigger slats with a backing board. We started to really get stuck into the detailing of this thing, how it was made up, and started working with a structural engineer to figure out how it was work, and that was Mark Hutchinson, I see him here, of Struct M Consulting, and he actually suggested using cross-laminated timber for this lightweight component. So we met with Jamie, and it was a really great product he's got, and that seemed like a really good fit for the project, could work really well, and we detailed that up. We submitted to council, and we got approval. The client was very happy. After we got approval, they then wanted to go get costings. So that was going to be fun. So they went out to go get costing from contractors and found it quite a difficult process, not having a QS with a bill of quantities to cost it, and the technology being cross-laminated timber. They could get a cost, obviously, from Jamie for the structure, but the cross-laminated timber is just the structure. It's not the envelope. It needs waterproofing, it needs insulation, it needs external cladding, weatherboard. So the costs were just ranging between, they were just too far apart. But what became apparent was they needed to cut down on the budget. So after all of that, they came back to us, and then we re-looked at the layout, and it became quite apparent that, to chop down the area substantially, to save costs, we could do away with the masonry component, which was quite cool because then this thing was just a timber box floating in the landscape. We repurposed that box that we had, got the living area to work within that, and then off we went. And without that masonry element there, we had this cool floaty timber bridge from the road into the property, which made for this like meandering experience. They loved it. And yeah, I think it was actually an improvement at the end of the day. 36. So, yeah, much lighter touch on the environment, and that's what it started looking like. This obviously doesn't have all of the trees rendered in, but some artistic license there. So that bridge became a really important part of the design. It really emphasized the treehouse feel to this, and we were really excited about it. They were really excited about it. And by not linking it directly to the parking area as well, you, off the road, park behind that stone wall, and then you kind of pushed back to then connect to the entrance pathway, which then leads you onto the bridge. So you have this whole arrival experience, and the house is pretty hidden from the road, which is really cool. There's the parking you can see just behind the stone wall and that bridge. The house really kind of hidden behind the treetops there. And once you have, it's just quite a magical experience. Walking down this bridge, you don't really see the house, and then you walk inside and pop, suddenly you've got views up to the mountains, but you also feel like you're really connected to the landscape. The south facade of the building is really mostly stacking, sliding, frameless glass. There's steel posts which are externalized. You can see one of them there, which transfers some of the load from the roof, which structure, which is also a cantilevered, cross-laminated timber slab, transfers some of that cantilever load down to the bottom, which is also a cantilevered, cross-laminated timber slab. So, well done, Mark. But Mark was really great to work with, and really at pushing the boundaries and exploring some of the concepts. There you can see the baboon proofing. So a lot of it was done away with over time. We kind of reduced it. It does limit then the amount of glazing that you can open without kind of baboon proofing. But it also does make it a lot more visually open and really make that connection to the landscape even more dramatic. So we did another council submission, this time without the masonry component. And yeah, then the client then realized, look, they needed more technical documentation for contractors to price. So we delved into that. We worked with Jamie and his team. Well, he provided us with a lot of information in terms of technical backup to detail this envelope, which consisted of the cross-laminated timber structure, which then had insulation on, vapor barriers, battens, counter battens. We had then a boarded structure layered over that the timber slats were fixed to, and then all the windows kind of framed and opened. That external layer eventually changed into a lunar wood panel. So rather than using a board with a slat, we actually it was probably more expensive to do this. But yeah, the lunar wood is a great product. It's very inert and very dimensionally stable, and it looks really nice too. So that's that. So here you can see that curvilinear facade really nicely, and the glass openings, large timber slats, baboon proofing. externalized steel post. And that really contrasted by the more rectilinear building form to the north. So that's the structure of the house. That's one of Jamie's renderings. And that box is supported on a steel frame structure. And that's some of the engineering to make that cantilever work. So back from that curvilinear edge, there's a steel beam, which it cantilevers from, and there's a steel beam above that as well, picking up some of the roof. And then you can see there's tiny little dots on that curvilinear edge, some of the steel posts, transferring some of the load from the one cantilever to the other. I hope I'm getting it all right, Mark. The foundations for that structure then were pretty innovative as well, something I haven't encountered before. This is the pile cap, which is a steel plate, and then there are steel tubes which are driven through that at different angles into the ground that basically form the pile foundation. That's the pile being driven into the ground by hand. So no concrete was used in the making of this building. The steel frame structure going up, and that's the cross-laminated timber and the building starting to take shape. So this all happened pretty quickly. The client also decided they were going to build this house themselves. So we weren't appointed for stage 5. We did have a degree of involvement, but a massive undertaking from their part. Different technology, cost challenges, was just after COVID, but they did it, and all credit to them for realizing this project. So no main contractor, all of the subcontractors, overlap between different subcontractors, they dealt with that themselves. So, but the product at the end of the day came out really well. Kerry has such a vested interest in the house that, in furnishing it, she said to me, she has such an appreciation now for the built environment and builders and contractors, that she won't put any furniture or anything into the house that hasn't been handmade. You can see that she could see that all of that cross-laminated timber machinery, plumbing, everything has a hand that touches it. It's all a craft that goes into making a building. So, and yeah, that was quite inspiring. This pool as well is an eco pool. Her uncle was very involved in the building of the building. And one day when I visited, one of the rare occasions that I did go to site, he said he came up with this idea for a pool. So I was like, oh no, please, what is he going to do? But he'd sketched out this really curvilinear form. He said, the curves of the building are so cool, he was inspired to do a curvilinear pool. So we talked about this thing, he sketched it out, and yeah, so they've channeled the water from one of the waterways close by. I'm not sure how legal that is, probably, but anyway, and has reactivated a portion of that dry riverbed that then feeds this eco pool that then refeeds that dry riverbed. So the water kind of, and there's frogs and birds and wildlife. It's yeah, very cool. So yeah, very cool project. Really nice to be involved, and I must really give thanks to the clients, Kerry and Roger. And if you want to go stay there, you can stay there. It's on Perfect Hideaways. They're renting it out. Thanks very much.